In this video, I'll be reviewing 5 recently released branding projects, large and small, to help you become a more discerning designer. Let's go! Hello friends, welcome back to Flux. My name is Matt Brunton. I'm back with our monthly brand identity review. We've got everything from internationally known sports teams to local charities to share with you. And why do we do this? Because it's fun, but also to cultivate our taste and appreciate what goes into creating great work. So number 1, we're going to go over to Edinburgh, Scotland. This project is from a studio called Do in Edinburgh, and it's for Home Aid, who provide furniture to people in need in this small community, the West Lothian community, close to Edinburgh. And we're going to have a look at the before and after. Is this real? I like how they've captioned it here, old and new, as if you weren't sure which one was which. Let's not comment on the old one. It was probably, a volunteer was asked to make something to put on a sign on the building or something like that. So we'll give them some grace. I'm presuming this is not a professional graphic designer. If it was you and you're watching, be ashamed of yourself. The new, we have this new combination mark, and West Lothian has been ditched. It doesn't need to be in the logo, and a shorter word is easier to present. And we have Homemade. And now we have this bird making its nest, which fits with the concept of home in a friendly way rather than the very literal way with this rudimentary house that they'd drawn before. And also the idea of furniture, that they're providing furniture just like the bird is putting the twigs together in their nest. We sometimes call it a stick of furniture. I don't know if you use that expression where you are. They've kept the red, a little bit of brand equity going through here. And we have a much more contemporary looking mark, and you can see how this would make a difference. You can see a large version of it here. It's pleasingly proportioned. It's interesting how they've this symbol they've created of the bird, they've put that in the center to divide the two words. That makes it nicely balanced rather than leaving it over the side, and they've made the sticks, the individual twigs, integral to the composition. I think that's a clever solution to provide balance to the whole thing. You can imagine how this would look good as an icon. There's also a range of other colors. I'm not sure about these alternative combination marks. They're not as balanced, particularly the one where the bird is roosting on top of the nest there, leans it over to the side. So I'm not sure where these are used. I prefer the main mark, but this bird is a charming little character, and it gives a friendliness to it that you'd want with a charity, but it also is a modern professional look. I love this. It's the one with the big bird. I won't do the Edinburgh accent. I don't want them coming down the border, all offended, but this is great that they've managed to achieve some sort of notoriety locally in their community, that they are recognized, that they're identified. And this is what we're talking about, aren't we? Brand identity. It's giving them an identity. It's making them identifiable, recognizable. And something as simple as this bird separates them. I know in my community, there's lots of different people who provide furniture to those in need. And I can't really remember their names or exactly where they are. These guys have identified themselves, and that's what branding can do, even for a small organization like this when it's done well. So respect to Do for taking on this project and helping this charity. I like the fact that the applications we see here, we're stationary, but this signage inside the warehouse, it's a realistic application of a genuine use case. Now, often we see the applications that look good, but putting this, on a phone case or like a billboard in Edinburgh, out of house advertising with the Edinburgh Castle in the background, it's not realistic. This charity probably aren't going to spend their limited resources, I'm imagining, on that kind of outdoor advertising. So these are genuine applications, like on the actual warehouse building that they're going to use, but it's successful in making it more friendly, more recognizable, but also more contemporary, more professional, without being too like standoffish or corporate or anything that would actually put off the users and the people involved in this charity, but putting it on a van. But we do have the obligatory tote bag. Branding always looks better on tote bags, right? So that's there. It does look well, and how the website might look. So well done to do, especially for getting involved with this charity and helping something in their community. So from a very small to a very large, we're going to talk about the rebranding of the National Football League team in Washington, D.C. in the United States. And this was known as the Washington Redskins. Here's their former helmet here. And for obvious reasons, I imagine they're obvious to everybody, they needed to change this name. And they became the Washington football team for a few years. The fans were wearing these headdresses and whatnot. So they moved away from this. And this was the Washington football team wordmark lockup that they were using. So it was a very generic name, nondescript. And they have now become the Washington Commanders. Now, I'm going to comment on this wordmark in a moment, but let's just think about this name for a second. In the Washington Post, which is the main daily newspaper there in DC, let's close all these adverts. It says that nearly half of Washingtonians don't like Commanders' name. Now, to be fair, who votes for change? The general public don't tend to go for that. But what do we think of this name? Let us know in the comments. I'm not sure about it either. I guess Commander because it's in DC, which is the seat of government in the United States. They call the president the Commander-in-Chief. I'm guessing that's where it's coming from. But it says here that 5% love, 36% like, 32% dislike, and 17% hate. So that's 49% on the negative here, which is the majority, because 11 have no opinion. It says people prefer Washington football team, the interim name, to Commanders or Redskins. I mean, 22% saying Redskins, only 26% Commanders. So not even that much more popular than this kind of name with all these troubling historical connotations. So the name is not the most exciting, but I appreciate how challenging a job this is, renaming something that is so important to people, the passion of sports fans. Let's have a look at this wordmark. I think overall it makes sense and it gives the general impression that you would expect with the sports teams. You'd expect something that is in uppercase. It's louder, it's bolder, it's more confident, in a heavyweight probably. But I'm not sure how these things work together, these two fonts that we have here. I think there are even different typefaces. They don't really seem like they belong together. If we look at I know this is extended, the Washington, whereas Commanders is condensed. But if you look at the general proportions of the S in Washington versus the S in Commanders, it's very different and there's no real relationship there. And I think it's a little bit jarring. I'm not sure as well about on the Commanders part, they've chopped on the terminals on the C and the S, the beginning and the end of the word. And that makes it a little bit more distinctive, but it doesn't really follow through in the rest of the type. So it seems a little bit strange when the rest of it is bears no reference to this slanted style. So what do you think? Good to make it distinctive, or looks odd and kind of jars with it? So although the general form of the lockup is maybe what is needed, I don't think it's quite executed as well as it could have been by a really skilled type designer. Then we come to this roundel. Now this is a badge. I'm not sure what they call it in American football parlance. I think a crest. We would call this a badge in English soccer. But it's definitely a roundel. And this is very odd. And I think this really looks a bit amateurish. Why? There's too much going on. We've got lots of type here rather than more iconic type symbols. And there's so many years. We've got 1932, 1937, 42, 83, 88, 92. And apparently they've had to actually change this twice because I think these are championship wins, but they were listing the Super Bowl year, not the season year, or somebody more familiar with the vagaries of American football can let me know. But there was issues here, and the fact that there's just so many dates, it's just bizarre to me. It's not really necessary. If you've won 5 championships, maybe there's a way to recognize that. Like in international football, we have soccer, we have the stars that appear on the badges for every time they've won a World Cup. So maybe something of this nature, but then we've got 3 stars, we've got the W letter mark. There's just too much going on, and it's not a very pleasing composition. It just looks a bit amateurish and not very thought through. When we look at the actual store, we can see their merchandise, and overall the feel is what you'd expect. The colours is something that I like. This is where they've retained equity all the way through, from the Redskins, the football team, to the Commanders, and it makes sense that brand equity, people recognize this maroon and yellow goldish color, and I think that looks distinctive enough. It's not too primary, and it's something that they can own, so it makes sense that they've kept that as a point of consistency. And I quite like the W letter form. I think on a t-shirt you can understand how that works. It looks pretty strong, and I like that. I think overall that works, and it's perfectly serviceable, but a lot of the other elements don't quite feel sharp enough to me, and I feel like there's more they could have brought in to be more distinctive rather than just their colour scheme. So hit and miss, this one. However, I will say I applaud the courage to step forward to pronounce a new name. It would have been very easy to just keep that generic name, Washington Football Team. That's kind of inoffensive. But to actually step out and create something more distinctive takes some guts. This is a very difficult job. It's an almost impossible job, really, to rebrand something that means so much to so many people and has got so many years of history. There's always going to be resistance at the beginning, and it's one of those things that people will probably just get used to. And within a few years, the Commander's name will just be accepted and part of the vernacular of the sport. Okay, down south now, from the United States to Mexico. This is for Manuvo, and this is by Pentagram, and this is a Mexican tech company that are involved in creating social progress and social change. One thing I really like about Pentagram's case studies, by the way, obviously these are perhaps the most notable brand identity design company in the world, but they have this one sentence at the top of every case study to just tell you what you're looking at. The title, Manuvo, brand identity. The company, the type of project, and then one sentence. What is it? Brand identity for a tech company creating cultural resources to inspire change and drive social progress. This is a great thing to do in your own portfolio. Give short context so the viewer knows what they're looking at. And these guys doing this social change, cultural change, and this is from Marina Wilder's team, I believe, at Pentagram in London. And we have here this sans serif that has a little bit of personality to it. Deep ink traps, which is kind of a mega trend, isn't it, at the moment? I think that's going to fizzle out at some point. But it works. It's a nice typeface, a little bit squarer proportions. Look at the C's. And then we have these colours, which I like. They're distinctive enough. Again, not too primary. We have this hot pink, this greyish cyan, this kind of deep mustard towards olive colour, and this orange. And they work well together, and they give it some distinctiveness. There isn't much else. I like this overlay of the colours, but we basically have a typeface, a colour scheme, and circles, which then grow to this wider pill shape. And my first thought was, not much here. Is this a low budget project, a short time scale, or does there need to be more elements? But then I had a look at the website, and I think this really works well. You can see even on the loading screen, we have the dynamic logo. So that's an interesting use to give it a little bit more dynamism, because if we look at the word mark in the top left, it's very simple. And here it's almost black on almost white. But they've used these simple shapes, the circle and the pills, to create nice compositions here. There's not even any photography, but just using that colour scheme and that shape, they've created an interesting composition and a clear headline. There's no menu, they want to lead us on a journey through the story of the website. So there's some very deliberate design decisions here. As you move through, we have nice animations, parallax scrolling, interesting photography, people doing things in the midst of activity. So there's a consistency to the photography. So actually, the feel of the brand is coming through, and I think this is a nice website that tells the story. You can see how even though these elements are few and very simple, they're very useful. So we can use circle as a masking shape for this photography. We can use the pill shape for these box outs to draw our eye towards things. And just by keeping it simple and using these devices, although they are few, it's enough with a skilled designer to create a distinctive identity and to be useful assets as they're building this website. So overall, the fact that they're storytelling through this website and this identity what's the word I'm searching for? It lends itself, there we go, to this masking and to these different devices. It becomes a useful identity. And I think that really shows the experience there of an agency like Pentagram, that they know that what they have is enough and they know how it will be used and they know it will be useful. So they didn't need to go producing, for example, endless illustrations that were not necessary, but they had a kit of parts that were enough to help them build out this identity. If you're feeling though like there's too many boring word marks like this Manuvo one here, then I've got a couple of interesting ones for you to round it out. So our fourth project today is Strawberry Western, and this is from a designer named Ryan Bugden, and this is for an anti-waste fashion label and the wordmark is drawn in both English and Japanese. Let's have a look at this animation here, the Japanese version and the English version. And let me scroll down and find another version of this wordmark, and we'll go back to these applications so we can analyze them. Here we go. Maybe this screen. So this is a really interesting word mark. It's centered in all caps, but we're using circles all the way through for the counters. And it's a really interesting, distinctive style. It's perhaps not the most legible, but I think that's okay for a fashion brand. It gives you a minute to read it, to discover what it says, and it makes it so much more distinctive. And this is a really creative approach, and this alone, with the color, obviously red, strawberry, you would expect that association, but it works. And then we have this strawberry icon which is built with a similar kind of look. Sorry, these thumbnails are from different projects. And just by using the circles and the icon and the word mark and the color red, we have a lot there. There's also these other set of icons that have been built that you can see on the right here that have other icons, iconography for, and they've used the circular counters again all the way through. He's also created some other fonts that have a similar feel, and they make it distinctive, they make it different, it looks more crafty, offbeat, and it gives it a whole feel. It talks about here a DIY ethos, and I think that comes through, but it's still fashion. One thing he mentioned in the notes is that the word mark has been redrawn at different sizes. We saw that on the bottom on the red. Let's go back there. So that means that it reduces really well. If you look here, very small, some of the negative spaces on the largest size. So when it reduces down, those spaces increase relatively proportionally, so they optically work and they don't close in when it becomes small. So it can be, for example, embossed like on the leather bag that we saw at the top. So smart solution here, distinctive word mark, nice work from Ryan Bugden. The final project we're going to look at today is Lubeznik Center for the Arts, and this is in the United States, in Michigan City, Indiana. I've actually been there, small town, but it's kind of on the road as you drive from Chicago around the south tip of Lake Michigan. And I was pretty surprised to find that there was an art center there. It's let's just say it's in the shadow of Chicago. It's a small provincial town. You maybe wouldn't expect, an art center, especially one with a super cool word mark like this. So Firebelly, an agency from Chicago, they've designed this dynamic word mark that moves from a lighter weight to a heavier weight dynamically. And this is a really smart way to do it. If you notice, the horizontal widths of each character don't change, so the weight is increased vertically, so the spacing always works the same, so it'll be across applications. And you can see some of the versions of this, the heavyweight and the lighter weight on these flags, and this really bold color scheme. Often with things like art galleries, you have black and white a lot of the time because you don't want to take away from the art, and that totally makes sense. And they've given space for the art by creating this almost like frames, but they've also introduced these vibrant colors like pink and yellow and this light purple-ish color. And that's really interesting because it gives it a little bit of life and personality, and I think that works really well in this instance, but it still lets the artworks shine through at the same time. Strong typography and a color scheme come together, and that is enough. And I just really dig this word mark. I think that it just gives them a really design-led feel to this center, even something in a provincial town. It's not a major big city, but it's cool enough to be, it has that vibe. It looks like something for like an indie record label or fashion brand or something. You can see here their idea of how the dynamic word mark would be used. The lighter weight is the formal version, and the heavier weight is the more playful version that they use more with community programs. And they've drawn the whole alphabet here, so that could be used for headlines, for example. And I think this is a really cool solution. Also worth mentioning, like we did with the first project, this is part of Firebelly's grant program. So once a year, they will work with some kind of non-profit and offer their full design services to them to help them with the work that they do in the community. I think that's an incredible thing. So kudos to Firebelly, especially for supporting the arts outside of the big cities. You can see how these different elements of the brand identity can also be used in things like badges. They can be used, for example, this might be a social media graphic. It can create frames, different types of masking, different compositions using these elements. And we've got a tote bag. We have to have a tote bag in every case study. I think there's a rule on that. But overall, really good work. You can see here the website. I think when it comes to the website, perhaps we lose a little bit of the cool factor and it becomes a little bit more functional, and that's okay. Design has to be functional first of all. Maybe it could have a little bit more edge to it, but you can understand that in the community, it's very legible, it's very easy to navigate, good hierarchy, big buttons. It makes sense, and I just really applaud the fact that it shows how design can make such a difference to communities like this through getting involved in these kind of projects. So believe in the power of design. So really nice work here from Firebelly for Lubeznik Art Center. I'm planning on heading to this part of the world in the summer, so maybe I'll even stop in over there and see what it looks like in the flesh, or these all Photoshop mock-ups. I'll find out. I'll let you know on Instagram. Keep this conversation going in the comments. I'll jump in there too. And if you want to step up your branding game, then check out our new Flux Academy branding course. There's a link for that in the description of this video. And until next time, happy designing.